The top story this hour, the US has received a letter from reclusive Taliban leader Mullah Omar on a prisoner swap. The unsigned note calls on the US president to release senior Taliban militants held at the prison camp in Guantanamo Bay. This as a first step toward peace talks. The letter was reportedly passed through a Taliban intermediary last July. The administration of US President Barack Obama did not directly respond to the letter. However, there are reports that Washington has broadened contact with the Taliban since then. This comes amid divisions among NATO member states on their exit plan from Afghanistan after a decade of war. Gareth Porter is an investigative journalist joining us now live from Washington to share his thoughts with us on this. Mr. Porter, first of all, what does this show in terms of the relations between the United States and Taliban? Negotiations now, of course, not directly between Mullah Omar and the United States. Where do you think this is going to lead to?
Well, first of all, in terms of where we've come from, I think it's very useful to recall that only 2 years ago or so, the Obama administration was still saying, privately at least, that it was not at all clear that the Mullah Omar and his Taliban leadership were going to be allowed to be participants in the peace process. There was a distinct notion within the Obama administration, particularly as far as the military leadership was concerned, that they would try to keep the Taliban from actually being represented in any peace talks. They were going to try to work around them, to try to pick apart the insurgency. You may recall early in the Obama administration, there was a lot of talk about separating different parts of the insurgency from the core, the hard core of people who would not compromise with the United States. I think that period, of course, is finished, and that now the Obama administration recognizes that it must, in fact, talk peace with Mullah Omar and the Shura, the leadership Shura of the Quetta group around Mullah Omar.
Well, if this is the strategy that's been adopted by the United States, then after 10 years of war, they came, of course, to take the Taliban out. Now the Taliban are going to gain political significance in Afghanistan as a result of these talks, presumably. We heard one senior former Taliban official saying that we are preparing ourselves to enter into the political scene of Afghanistan. So what's going to be achieved if this is going to happen?
Well, of course, it still remains to be seen what the United States is ready to offer at the negotiating table. So far, they have not given any indication that they, meaning the officials who are policymakers on Afghanistan within the Obama administration, are prepared to put on the table even the possibility of a timetable for withdrawal. And this is the bottom line and has been the bottom line from the very beginning for the Taliban leadership and, of course, for Mullah Omar himself. They have made it clear to every intermediary who has had contact with them over the last 2 or 3 years that they will not talk peace with the United States until and unless the United States is indicating to the Taliban that it is prepared to put on the table a timetable for withdrawal. They're not saying that the timetable has to be specified in advance of negotiations, but they need a signal of good faith by the United States, and that signal is going to have to be a statement saying the United States is ready to talk timetable for withdrawal.
Well, Mr. Porter, do you think then the United States is going to be persuaded to give those concessions to the Taliban? When you're speaking about here in this report a prisoner swap, in Guantanamo Bay, prisoners be released from there, and also you say that the withdrawal issue. So do you think that the United States, in order not to fail in its fight against the militants, well, on the ground it's not been achieving anything, these militant attacks are continuing, that on the negotiation table it's going to give those concessions to them?
Well, based on the past record of U.S. wars in which the United States took a very hard-line position at the outset of the negotiations, and I'm thinking, of course, now of the Vietnam War, the United States is ultimately going to make that concession. There's no doubt in my mind about that. The question is whether it can happen in a presidential election year. Now, in Vietnam, of course, it did happen in the Nixon administration's election year, the year that President Nixon ran for re-election in 1972, that the Nixon administration did make the key negotiating moves to make possible a final peace agreement. And it is possible that that could happen during the election campaign of Barack Obama, that he will decide that it would be a net plus significant enough for him to make that concession. But I'm not persuaded at this point that that is very likely. I think it's going to have to be further on down in the course of this war, 2013, 2014, or even beyond.
Gareth Porter, investigative journalist, joining us there live from Washington. Thank you very much, Mr. Porter.